Be interesting. Can I go live? I don't. Oh, hey. Well, we'll see if anyone's actually going to be here. I should probably wait, but first of all, let me apologize to everyone. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. It is once again me, the sanctimoniously, technologically impaired, notoriously sanctimonious RMB here. Sorry about the confusion. I was attempting to log in with a bunch of new software, new technological advancements, and apparently I don't quite yet know how it all works. But I'm getting there. It's cool. It's I promised I was upping my game for these chats. I should have tested this more, figured out what technical difficulties that I was suffering from, because apparently I was suffering from a lot of technical difficulties. So I apologize. Welcome, all of you imagination connoisseurs, to the 114th live Robservations chat. I cannot believe it's been, how has it been this long? How has it, let me get a little closer to you here. How has it been so long? How has it been 114 chats? I don't know. It's been a long, strange trip that continues apparently into May. It's been great though. I really love having you guys. I love the burgeoning imagination connoisseur community. It's been fantastic having you all be a part of this, you imagination connoisseurs. And before I start, I want to mention that this chat is being brought to you, of course, by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And for those who are interested, you can go. I love their products. I actually tried their moisturizer today that I'm quite enjoying. It made my face feel good. But if you'd like to go to getluckytiger.com, if you enter in the code PGS for Post-Geek Singularity, when you check out, you get 20% off your order. And that is only for people who are in the know. Well, as I am wont to do, I've got a few letters to read, and there's some good ones today. This letter comes from Patrick Lee. Dear Mr. RMB, first, I want to thank you for your YouTube channel, if I can get it to work correctly. First, I want to thank you for your YouTube channel. I watch your show daily, and it is a soothing break from my daily grind. I applaud your honesty about the career choice mistakes that you share and how sometimes at night you look in the mirror and you want to tear your face off, asking yourself, why are you doing this? I was not yesterday and Monday because, as you all know, we finished the color timing of Tango Shalom, and that was a great victory for me. So that was fantastic. In hindsight, I might have made some wrong career choices that do not make sense financially, but made sense to me psychologically. There is a tinge of regret when the bills pile up, but when I think deeply about it, continuing on the path I used to walk would drive me crazy and very unhappy. That is the bargain, I think, to have to deal with until my current situation improves. Your discussions made me watch old episodes of The Twilight Zone, and one episode hit me. It's called The Changing of the Guard. It sums up my fear. That's a great Twilight Zone episode, by the way. If you go watch Change of the Guard, everyone, it'll bring a tear to your eye. It sums up my fear that at the end of my life, I am feeling what the old professor who was forced to retire felt. He felt his life was a waste and bearing no impact on anyone or the world. The message of the episode was not to discount all of our sincere, honest efforts, the kindness and words of encouragement you give to someone, which we never give a second thought. It has impacted other people you touched to achieve greater heights of heroism and success than you. But your words help them in their time of testing and trials. Please continue your talks and discussion. Your words are words of encouragement to continue the passion we are working on and working with. Believe me, your words of kindness and enthusiasm for life help us continue our daily slog. You may read this on the air, but don't mention my name. Patrick Lee, I mentioned your name. I didn't realize you didn't want me to mention your name. And you're a fan from the Philippines. I profusely apologize. I've done it again. Maybe I should erase this chat and start over. Should I do that? I'm sorry, Patrick. Your letter was very heartfelt, and once again, I have to profusely apologize. I didn't realize that you didn't want me to mention your name. I didn't see that at the bottom of the letter. I apologize. I really like that letter. I hope you're not too mad at me for making that mistake. I thought it was great. Plus, you're reading or watching The Twilight Zone, which I greatly appreciate. But once again, that was the second time I've done that. I've read a letter. I didn't mean to mention your name. I didn't know you didn't want me to mention it. I'm sorry. I'll send you a gift. I'll send you a gift to make it up to you. But so please send me your email. I will send you a gift. I apologize for that. But I thought that was a great letter. And, I think what you were saying really resonates in the sense that you just never know what you do to people or how you can affect someone's lives. I mean, it didn't occur to me when I started doing these chats how I was going to get contacted by everybody. People started writing letters, and I didn't plan to read letters on the air. Actually, it was something that sort of organically grew out of the Post-Geek Singularity community, because people started sending me these heartfelt letters, and I started sharing them, and I started getting more. And I apologize again for reading your name, because when people send me these heartfelt things, I think it's important that we're all that's kind of the point of this community, is that we do share what it is that moves us. And ultimately, I started this channel to share my enthusiasm, because life, as I've said, is pretty damn good. As they said in Full Metal Jacket, the dead only know one thing: it is better to be alive. So while we're here, we might as well enjoy ourselves to the full. And there's so much, if you're an imagination connoisseur, to be loving. I mean, Endgame rolling through, it's going into its third weekend approaching. I mean, we're on in the middle of the day, or middle of the week, hump week, and who knows where it's going to go. We got Detective Pikachu opening, a movie I never thought would ever be made, much less open. And we've got Game of Thrones episode 5 in the final season coming out, although it's been very controversial. This season, of course, has been very controversial, but who would have thought we would have gotten 8 seasons of Game of Thrones? Pretty amazing, I must say. Got another letter here. This comes from our moderator, one of my great moderators, Terry Flynn, who always writes very great letters. Terry is over in the UK, and I'm sure I can. Let me just check. Yes, he says I can read his letter. And I love getting Terry's letters from across the pond. I hope you do too. Dear Rob, I don't know whether now, being a moderator, I should write letters. Yes, you should. But tonight I feel compelled to write something, since it follows in part from Willow's last piece about Star Trek. The main thing that really resonated with me, and which helped define what a Star Trek battle is essentially a submarine battle. Indeed, I just watched Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I knew full well that was the way of doing it. The battle in the Mutara Nebula is the ultimate Star Trek battle. The tension is spellbinding. The plot that Khan can't think in 3D. Khan can't think in 3D is a totally realistic plot point that enables the Enterprise to ultimately defeat him. Spock's death is, of course, so emotional. I have read accounts that claim a lot of extras on set had to bite their hands as they realized he was being killed off. I'm reminded of Endgame. Nothing in the JJ reboot comes close. The slow battle is something I think younger viewers really need to see and appreciate. Willow clearly can, but there are a lot of other millennials who really need to take a page out of her book. Why am I so fired up about this? Well, mainly because the JJ reboot is, in my opinion, so absolutely dreadful. I have not seen the third film and will never, ever see it. I'm not one of those lame people who claim to boycott a film and then go see it. I put my money where my mouth is. The second film was so dreadful that I won't even watch the third when it is free, like on an airplane. JJ Trek is simply an abomination. This leads me onto the iteration of Star Trek that we won't name. I only stuck with season 2 because of Anson Mount. Will I watch any season 3? No. I don't care if it's free in my Netflix package. Netflix does record what is watched, and I intend to show that Star Trek has been screwed. I will do exactly what I did with JJ3. I simply won't watch, even if it is free. That is how the powers that be will learn that we fans of proper Star Trek feel cheated and won't pay for the truly execrable stuff they now churn out. As a final note, as you know, I'm a keen observer of film scores. James Horner certainly scored Star Trek 2 well. It's a pity then he just reused this in virtually all of his subsequent films. This is one reason I want Avatar to be beaten. I was genuinely annoyed watching it when I anticipated a scene, having realized it was a Horner score that he was reusing a theme from Star Trek 2. He did in Aliens as well. Very bad form. What amazed me even more was that a friend showed me he didn't plagiarize himself, which is not necessarily awful, but certainly annoying, but he stole from established classical composers like Prokofiev and Vaughan Williams. Just one final reason why I want Avatar to be beaten by Endgame. Silvestri is always original. Kind regards, Terry. What are you doing over there? Gilbert's eating his bone. Well, Terry, I don't necessarily disagree with you. My hatred for the JJ movies is well known. But and I do like Horner's scores. I think a lot of film composers. I mean, hell, if you go listen to one of the great film scores of all time, which is King's Row, John Williams did in fact borrow a lot of King's Row from John Williams, he borrowed a lot of Star Wars from King's Row, Eric Korngold score. But I think a lot of people do that. There's a lot of borrowing, but yes, James Horner is very much known for how much he borrows. But when it comes back, Terry, in the letter I'm going to read last, brought me back to this idea of suspension of disbelief, which is the very foundation of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, especially media. In order to buy into it, the world must be created that we all believe in. And when it's funny, when you have a fantasy world, for instance, I always talk about Back to the Future, but I always say that you get one ask when you're making a movie. You get one really big ask. And in the case of, say, Back to the Future, the ask is that time travel is real, that we believe in the ability of people to travel through time. And in the case of Back to the Future, what's great about that is, yes, funnily enough, Doc Brown built his time machine in a DeLorean, but the DeLorean has rules to follow in order to travel through time. It has to have a certain amount of power. It's got to go, 88 miles per hour. It has to have a certain amount of gigawatts generated in order to go back in time. So it allows you, the idea of time travel becomes more real when there are practical, at least in the film, practical realities that you have to consider before you can travel through time. You need the DeLorean, you need the power, you need the speed. And those are the rules that suddenly allow you as an audience to suspend your disbelief. You're like, okay, I now will believe in time travel. And Back to the Future is I think it's one of the great fantasy screenplays ever written. The stories, it's airtight. I mean, the movie, people talk about things like Raiders of the Lost Ark being a perfect movie or Alien being a perfect movie. I think Back to the Future, as far as it goes, is pretty damn perfect. The script is airtight. And I really think, and even though it's a movie about time travel, which doesn't exist, at least yet, you believe it. The movie makes you believe because it sets up your ask, the time travel ask, but it provides enough plausibility through its limitations and rules that you believe in something. And it's interesting. For instance, in Star Wars, there's a lot to buy into. One of the first things is that you buy into sound in space. That's an ask. We all know that space is a vacuum and sound doesn't travel. But when you're watching a movie, the actual medium itself, the medium of motion pictures, demands, in the world where sound exists, that we hear something, especially in a movie called Star Wars. Can you imagine if in Star Wars, if all the space battles were silent? One of the great things that Stanley Kubrick did, because he was striving for scientific accuracy when he was making 2001, we do see space is silent, that sound can't travel in a vacuum. But what he did was, brilliantly, we are hearing through the intercoms of the spacesuits. We hear the breathing and we hear the comm systems even when the astronauts are out in space. So it's a very cinematic way of dealing with space travel and remain scientifically accurate. I've once heard that one of the only mistakes in 2001 scientifically is that the straw that Dr. Floyd is sipping out of whether I think it's on the Aries 1B when he sips, or I think it's the Aries 1B, and then when he sips this something out of the straw, that it actually goes back down because of gravity, and that wouldn't happen. It's like that kind of accuracy, though, that they paid attention. What it would be hard to deal with that, but it's really interesting, and I'm obsessed with how do you create these fictional experiences. Horror movies are even more interesting when you think about how far are you allowed to suspend your disbelief in a horror film. Like I was talking about how much I enjoyed Hellraiser. So in Hellraiser, there's like the lament configuration, this box, this puzzle box, that we're asked to believe that when you open up this puzzle box, somehow, somewhere in the afterlife, a message is sent to the Cenobites. And I guess a doorway is open to hell, or a realm of hell, the maelstrom, wherever the Cenobites live. I mean, it's very funny. I love movies like when you're watching Hellraiser, you're thinking to yourself, okay, you go along with that. You believe that when Frank Cotton opens the lament configuration and the Cenobites come, you believe that they've been summoned. But what I'm always tickled by, and when you're watching the movie, you never think about these things. But what are the Cenobites doing when they're not summoned? Like, are they playing cards? Is it like a fire station when the firemen and the great fire people are just waiting for the fire to start? They're waiting to be summoned. I mean, you go to work and, for the most part, I think firemen just really want to just hang out in the fire station unless they're called upon to come out and put out a fire or rescue people in a car crash or something, whatever it is that they're doing. But before they're actually doing their job, just like the Cenobites, before the Cenobites are actually doing their jobs, before someone opens the lament configuration, which, let's face it, people aren't opening that thing every day. So what are they doing? What are they doing? They're clearly people that have a purpose, and they have thought processes, and they're intelligent. They get it. They understand human folly. They've been watching it for a long, long time. My favorite, but you believe it. Now, my favorite movie that I always cite in terms of my own suspension of disbelief, and I marvel that even I am able to suspend my disbelief watching this movie, and that is both the American remake and the original Japanese movie Ringu, or the American remake was The Ring, that Gore Verbinski directed. Now, in this movie, in The Ring, and I think about this all the time in terms of the stories I want to tell and suspending disbelief in the context of fantasy cinema. Let's all, if you haven't seen The Ring, you might want to duck out of the conversation right now, but lest you forget, the premise of The Ring is that there was a beleaguered girl, Sumara in the American version, Sadako in the Japanese version, and because of certain psychic trauma she underwent, she imprinted a videotape, a VHS tape with her trauma. That's a pretty big ask right there. She was able to psychically put images on a videotape. How that worked, what the mechanics are of that, you don't know. So, but you go with it because it's a horror movie. But that's a pretty big ask, because you're asking somebody to believe, your audience to believe, that this character was able to psychically imprint on a video cassette. How that was done, how these images were actually organized and recorded, yeah, we don't really get into that, but we'll buy it. Oh, but that's just the beginning of our journey. Then, of course, the videotape is played. And if you watch this videotape, after the videotape plays and it's over, your telephone rings. And then after your telephone rings and you pick up the phone, you hear a voice on the phone saying, 7 days. Cool. Works in the context of a horror film. But then here's what I want to know. Wherever Sadako or Samara is in the afterlife, first of all, she what's the mechanism by where she knows, wherever she is, because clearly she's a spirit somewhere, that she knows that a videotape has been played? How does that work? Like, Is there some psychic or evil switchboard that bad energy gets sent out into the ether? And then she's found, maybe she's hanging out in the same room with the Cenobites. And she finds out that this videotape has been watched. Okay. And then she calls the person on the phone because apparently she has a landline wherever she is. And she calls you on the phone 7 days and says that. It freaks you out. Well, then this isn't even the craziest part. Then at the end of that 7-day period of time, if someone else hasn't watched the videotape, if you haven't like shown it to someone else and I guess moved forward the curse of Samara or Sadako, she'll come through your television set. She'll literally crawl out of your TV set and strangle you, take your life force away, scare you to death. I mean, it's amazing. So first of all, she psychically imprinted a videotape. Then she knows somehow when someone's watched that videotape. Then she calls them on their landline on the phone from wherever, because apparently in the afterlife there's landlines. But, maybe she's got psychic dark energy that allows her to get on the phone system. Who knows? And then she has a way to come through your TV. She can use a signal to beam herself into your TV, and then she goes from being non-corporeal to being corporeal, and somehow was able to take your life force. Now, this is absurd, patently absurd. Even I, who am willing to believe a lot of things, I'm willing to believe Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, could exist. I believe the Titans, the kaiju monsters. I'll buy into that. Like, okay, I believe that even in a Godzilla movie, there's a planet 10 or a planet X that have aliens that are being beleaguered by Ghidorah, and they ask to borrow. They come to Earth. It's our first contact with aliens. They borrow Godzilla and Rodan. I'll believe that. But when I start watching movies like The Ring, while I'm watching it, I never think. I'm being captivated by the story. Oh my God. I think the opening of Gore Verbinski's The Ring, man, that's some scary shit. And you don't quite know what's going on, but it's a little crazy. It's a little nutty. And if you really start breaking down what's happening, like I just did for you, it all falls apart. I'm like, even though I love The Ring, I love both the original Ringu and I love Verbinski's American remake. I think it's terrific. But when you think about what's going on, it's like, man, how do we buy into that? Even when you're watching the movie, we're going along and we're buying into the craziness of what's happening. But when you sit back and analyze it in the end, it's absurd. How they're able to convince you of buying into the story of The Ring is it's like a magic trick. It's like a magic trick. And then, so why is it then that when I watch Star Trek Discovery and they have a spore drive, when they talk about the mycelial network and a spaceship can travel 50,000 light years in an instant traveling through the spore, why can't I believe that? Why? Because everything in science tells me something like that is not only couldn't it exist, it's just patently stupid. I mean, I understand where they got that from. They were ripping off dunes, folding space. I get all that. But then to tie it to an older concept that the first showrunner brought, where they were using terraforming, they were using mushrooms to terraform. That's what the whole mycelial network was all about. But to get rid of that and to sort of change what Brian Fuller had done, they had to do something. So, somebody saw Dune and was probably stoned and said, yeah, let's make a spore drive. Instead of terraforming, we'll have a spaceship. Well, I can't believe that in my Star Trek. I need to be able to suspend my disbelief. I've had warp drive. I believe in warp drive. That's easy to understand. It's some kind of space-time concept that's based in relativity or something, a space warp. I'll buy that. That's an ask that I can go with. Anyway, this brings me to the third letter that I wanted to read today, and it comes from Zach Losel, and it speaks to this very topic, and it's what really got me thinking about today's chat here. Shalom, Rob. I hope you've had an incredible weekend as we all continue to witness and take part in the glory that is Avengers Endgame. I've seen it twice now and plan on seeing it at least 2, maybe 3 more times while it's still in theaters. I am still in awe. Seeing the positivity, speculation, and collective joy this movie, nay, unstoppable force of a cinematic experience or of cinematic excellence, has brought to so many people in such a short period of time, I felt compelled to finally write to you. Your videos and live streams, when I can catch them, have become part of my daily routine, as they have for so many others. Whether it be viewer letters, super chats, or just a predetermined topic by our favorite notoriously sanctimonious one, thanks for that, your wealth of knowledge and imagination continue to inspire me. Your healthy mix of childlike elation and professionalism is absolutely contagious as you have created something that is truly unique in this, the Post-Geek Singularity. Schnepp would be proud. It's very nice for you to say, actually. It was his idea. It was John Schnepp's idea. He wanted me to do my own show. So thank you. That means a lot that you say that. To be honest, though, it's been a rough year so far personally. Work, family, friends, and my own health have all been adversely affected by varying circumstances. However, through this channel and this community, you've given me the courage to stop procrastinating and start working on making my own content, and hopefully share my enthusiasm for all the awesome things that exist and are soon to be. I love to hear that. As I write this letter while watching Season 6, Episode 16 of The Next Generation, Birthright Part 1, we now live in a timeline where Endgame has grossed a mind-bending $2.2 billion worldwide. Everyone I know has seen it. Those who haven't plan on doing so. Most of the YouTube channels and other critics I follow all seem to be equally as enthused about this movie as I am. I've never lost complete control of my body like I did at a certain point in that final hour upon my first viewing. I mean, dude, seriously, almost fell over the seats in front of me. I think you know which part I'm talking about, Rob. Indeed, I do. And since the Russo brothers aren't spoiling things, I'll bet it was when Cap summoned Mjolnir and wielded it like the boss he is. We've connected to these characters on an emotional level that is seldom reached in any franchise. To do so across 22 films, where our investment in these characters and the overarching plot exponentially grows, is simply masterful. They've given us things I never thought we'd get on screen, executed with a reverence thus far unmatched. Through this, we've been able to experience incredible moments along the way. This brings me to my main point. Do you think there is a limit, a cap, on what audiences are willing to accept within the parameters of these movies? What is the line of verisimilitude, the gift of a word that keeps on giving, that must not be crossed? And by these movies, I'm mainly referring to comic books, science fiction movies. In most of these movies, the audience is somewhat expected to take certain leaps of faith within the storytelling, common for genre filmmaking. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has done an incredible job of keeping these things in mind thus far. However, I've noticed certain elements in Endgame that have caused some pockets of fans to write the movie off because of what they would consider plot holes. I'm not saying they don't exist, nor is it wrong for anyone to simply not like what they don't like. But without getting into spoilers, I find it odd that some elements are accepted without thought, even if they are far-fetched, and some are written off completely as though inconceivable. As brought up on Campia's show, there is also the argument of this. Would you get rid of these plot holes if it also meant getting rid of those incredible moments that are, more often than not, paid off in the film? I truly look forward to your reply. If you happen to think this letter holds any worth, I give you my full permission to read it on a live chat. For all you do, and for those of you who, for all you do, and for all of those who of you, let me try this again. For all you do, and for all of those you inspire, thank you for giving us a place to come together and celebrate all of the sweaty goodness that exists. The Post-Geek Singularity is alive and thriving, my friend. Shalom, and may the force be with you. Zach Losel. P.S. How fucking great was this weekend's Game of Thrones? Well, this Zach letter was the letter that really got me thinking about this, because I'm constantly thinking about suspension of disbelief. You know, I as I was just saying, I'm constantly amazed at when people like the time travel element in Endgame has really, I think, tripped a lot of people up, especially longtime imagination connoisseurs and you members of the Post-Geek Singularity and all members of the greater Post-Geek Singularity. I've had many debates, more debates about time travel in Endgame than any science fiction film or any fantasy film or any superhero film that's come out in a long time. A lot of people, because there's so many, as I call them, asks there's so many asks in Endgame, levels of asks in the movie, that I too find it astonishing that so many people are like for instance, we just assume superheroes are real in these movies. Nobody has a problem with the superheroics. I mean, John Campea has often talked about how Iron Man's tech, his iron suits, have now become essentially magic. Oh, I hit a button and nanotechnology gives me the new Iron Man suit. That's amazing and powerful. But even that, like, I know where John's coming from. I'm like, the whole thing about the Iron Man suits is they've evolved over the last 11 years. They've become incredibly more technologically advanced to the point where he can just step in and out of them. And we've gone with it. So the Iron Man suit alone, when you finally get to nanotech suits that we saw in Infinity War first, that's a huge ask. But we're just like, no, because once you believe in Iron Man's suit, once they make you believe in Iron Man's suit in Iron Man 1, it doesn't matter anymore where it comes from. Nanotech, whatever. We believe that Iron Man's suit is real. So we're willing to believe that. Then we get Thor. We believe in Asgard. We believe in Mjolnir. We believe in all of Thor's powers. So that would, in any movie, Thor would be the ask if we believe in Thor. Then we get to Captain America and the super soldier serum. We believe that could happen. Scrawny Steve Rogers becomes buff, strapping Steve Rogers. We believe he fought off Hydra in World War II. We even believe that he goes into the ice at the end to save the world, basically, is frozen, and they revive him 70 years later. So between Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America, we've got more asks than most people are allowed to have in any science fiction film. Normally, when, say, a movie like Arrival comes to Earth, or Arrival comes to our multiplexes and it's about aliens coming to Earth, the ask is that aliens exist and we believe in them. But then that movie goes to great pains, even though they look very different than we do. They have a very different language. The ask is the aliens and their culture and their technology. And we've already been conditioned by decades of cinema and television and novels and basically the entire 20th century canon of speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, and horror has primed us to believe in this kind of stuff. So it's not a problem to believe in aliens. We believe, of course, aliens are out there. So that ask is not something that's a problem. It's what happens. It's the interaction with the aliens that then have to be believable. They come down with these ships. We don't see any power source, but yeah, we believe they could just float there. Or they could be that big. We believe the aliens could spew ink like a squid or something. We buy it. But if you get to Endgame, if you think about it, we don't just have 3 superheroes. Then we have Ant-Man, and we believe that he can shrink, that PIM technology, PIM particles are real. Then we believe in the quantum tunnel that he's built, that they've built. We believe that he can shrink a skyscraper can be put into a briefcase. You can shrink a tank down and put it on a keychain. There's an enormous amount of asks for each one of those movies. And then when you put them all together, in the Avengers first and now in Infinity War and Endgame, look at how many asks everybody believes in. Black Panther, Wakanda, that they can cloak an entire country from spy satellites. All of these asks. And where most people are getting tripped up now is in the time travel aspects of Endgame. So you already made your way through the suspension of disbelief of you probably 200 different asks. And then we get down to the time travel element. And that's where people are bumping. This is why I love our Post-Geek Singularity. This is why I love the world that we're living in, because we're having online debates about quantum time travel as opposed to, say, the time travel in Back to the Future. And I think that Mr. Los's letter is an incredible letter, because the question he asks is, how far can we suspend our disbelief before it snaps and breaks? Now, I've seen things in my life. We've got Detective Pikachu coming out, and that movie is dependent upon the fact that you could believe that there's a world where Pokemon exist. I mean, I have Pokemon Go on my phone. I can actually, it helps my suspension of disbelief that if I want to go to hunting or gathering Pokemon, because I got to catch them all, I can see a reasonable representation in the real world on my phone of Pokemon. So could go see Detective Pikachu and buy into it. Maybe she could. I don't know. But it's just I think the whole question philosophically, it becomes a really interesting, wacky question to ponder. Where does your belief end? How far can you take your suspension of disbelief before it snaps and breaks for you? Like, there's a lot of people in last season's Game of Thrones. We've talked about the distance traveled and how fast people move from place to place. And I think that's still a problem. See, for instance, I'll give you an example. I didn't find that to be a problem. I believe that, okay, they do say in the episode that I think Tyrion says it'll take a fortnight for the troops to march down to King's Landing. That's 2 weeks. I'll buy that. I'll believe it takes 2 weeks. Well, if it takes 2 weeks to march down to King's Landing, how long did it take last season for the Ravens to go to Dragonstone and Danny to fly back across the wall? It seemed like it took a few hours, but knowing how much time you have to traverse and how long it takes, people are like, I don't believe that. That could never happen. So it depends too. Like there's an expectation. I watched a really interesting analysis this morning before I had to go out. A really interesting analysis of Game of Thrones, and one of the reasons why we bought into Game of Thrones and we knew that there's magic and dragons is that there was very little of it. And this guy's channel, he was also talking about how in Star Wars, in the first Star Wars movies, the first trilogy of the Force, you hear a lot about it. You see Luke train, and the biggest thing that happens with the Force is Yoda rises the Luke's X-Wing out of the swamp on Dagobah. And that was like the most extreme example of the Force powers being wielded by somebody, until you get to the Emperor blasting Luke with lightning. And for the most part, it keeps it believable. The small amount of force using that we saw in the original trilogy kept our suspension of disbelief in check. The same was true of magic in Game of Thrones. And what was really interesting is that Game of Thrones was so great because it kept it so real, so down to earth, so naturalistic. And while we knew that there was magic out there, nobody was using it to blast their enemies on a daily basis. I mean, it was really in the background. Well, now, especially in these latter seasons, they brought magic to the forefront. Hey, let's turn on those Dothraki swords with fire. The Lord of Light will do it for you. And we're now watching. We've got these incredibly powerful. Not only can you take out a flying dragon, but we believe that those weapons were forged and built and made, and now they were able to mount them to ships and things like that, because the amount of force that those weapons must expend when they're being fired, I don't even know if I believe that they could be bolted down to the front of a ship without tearing the the top of the ship off. And those are and the kind of power, that they're showing, that they're able to generate from those bows, because that's essentially what they are. They're giant crossbows. Do I believe that that thing, they could fire that far? I mean, there's a lot, and I think part of what's happened with Game of Thrones is that it's strained credulity. And I think they've gotten to the point where all of for instance, I said last night that I don't believe that the thing that makes me the thing that breaks my disbelief in Game of Thrones is when our characters that have been smart act dumb. And when they're marching down, they should be ever vigilant. And if you have air power, if you have dragons, you got to reconnoiter where you're going. All you have to do, they're walking. Just fly 10 or 20 miles ahead and see what's out there. Take a nice spin around the lands. That there's ships out there. That there's opposing forces. Why not just, I don't know, fly and check it out? I didn't believe that our characters suddenly got dumb and wouldn't think of those things. And I don't like it when credulity is strained in that way. I don't like it when my fantasy, especially my Star Trek or Star Wars, it's okay because they establish it as science fantasy, not so much science fiction. So there can be sound in space. Giant Star Destroyers, like, I don't like it in Star Trek when the Enterprise, for instance, in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek '09 was built on Earth. because in my life, Star Trek, it was understood the component parts were built on Earth and then brought into space and assembled in orbit, because a starship like the Enterprise is not built to hang out in the gravity well of a planet. It certainly isn't able to take off or land in the ocean. So the JJ movies, and that's just one of the many things that my credulity, anything I believed in, was strained to the breaking point. I didn't believe the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies for many, many reasons, which is one of the reasons I have such a problem with them. But then again, I'm fascinated. Where do we all draw the line? Everybody has a different line to draw depending on what kind of a person you are. And I think it's always an interesting debate to get into and to talk to. I find it interesting as a storyteller myself. When you're editing a movie, you're always talking about logic, how much time has passed. Can you, like, for instance, if you're a great storyteller and you're working in film and you're trying to show the passage of time, that can be very, very tricky, especially when you have parallel action or parallel plot development going on where things are supposed to be happening at the same time. 24. If you live in Los Angeles, the TV series 24 frequently made you go, wait a minute. At this time of day, you can't drive from downtown LA to Hollywood in 5 minutes. Just even when there's no traffic. And so 24, I mean, for that show, I was always impressed by just how well they actually did on that show, on the Jack Bauer Power Hour, as I used to call it. But you can only take that so far. So where are your limits? I mean, I'm curious, where do you guys think? Where do you end your suspension of disbelief? Where do you throw up your hands and go, I don't believe this? Where is that line in the sand for you? Where's the Rubicon that is crossed for your belief to be? Where does your disbelief end? Or your suspension of disbelief end and just your disbelief begin? And how does that affect how you watch science fiction, fantasy, and horror films? I really want to hear about it. Write me letters at the Burnettwork. Give me examples. Tell me what you think, because I'm as a filmmaker, I've actually started working on a new script, and based on a favorite novel of mine, and I'm working on getting the rights to that novel. But there's some believability in this. It's grounded. It's very grounded, very earthbound, this story, even though it deals with an interesting first contact situation. But there are things that happen in the book that almost cross a line. And there are things that I really love about this particular book. And I'm wondering, well, that's why I want to make it into a movie. But I'm wondering, like, maybe you just get rid of those things. Maybe it strains credulity. It strains believability too much. I don't know. I'll have to see. I'm going to put it all in there and see if I have to pull it back. But, we'll see. And when you're editing a movie, you're dealing with those things. Belief, like in our film, Tango Shalom. And it always fascinates me. And because I've been discussing with friends and acquaintances my whole life, when we get around, you have drinks, you talk about which starship. We do a panel at Comic-Con. I invite you this year at San Diego Comic-Con. We've been doing it since 2002. This is the 17th year we'll be doing it at Comic-Con. It's called Starship Smackdown. It's really kind of a joke, but it was born out of the conversations we had. Like, could the Starship Enterprise take out a Star Destroyer? And then you start running it down. Like, there's different physics. Well, there's not different physics, but there's different technologies in both universes. I think the Enterprise could take a Star Destroyer out, no problem. People are like, what about fighters? I'm like, they could never catch the speeds that the Enterprise can travel in hyperspace. It's all different. But again, see, already the wheels are turning. You're thinking to yourselves right now, could the Enterprise take out a Star Destroyer? What if the Battlestar Galactica was added into the mix? This is why we've been doing Starship Smackdown for 17 years. But it all comes down to believability. How do you make those things work? How are they going to bring the X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and make it believable? See, I maintain that there's already mutants in the X-Men universe. There are already mutants in the MCU. Scarlet Witch is a mutant. Quicksilver was a mutant. They're just calling them miracles. So in my mind, they're already there. There's already mutants there. We just don't know. We haven't seen them yet. So anyway, but where is that line for you guys? Fascinated by it. Don't know the answer. And is it important? I think it is. I think that if you're making science fiction, fantasy, and horror films, I think the believability of your universe and those asks, they have to be well thought out. And I think one of the great problems that we're seeing in Game of Thrones, and certainly in modern Star Trek, is the writers are not doing that. Whereas in the original Star Trek, look, they had to figure out a cheap way of getting people from the ship down to a planet. So they created the transporter rather than using, say, like on the Orville, they don't have transporters. They always have shuttles. But it was a great way to do it. And then they came up with this idea of the transporter, and they made you believe it. It's technology that certainly didn't exist in the 60s. It doesn't exist now. It's an ask, but they make you believe. Whereas in Star Trek Discovery, everything that happens there, I don't even, the Red Angel, I don't believe it. I don't believe any of it. And that's problematic. That's very problematic. And I think great science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I mean, look, The Ring, we talked about The Ring. How did they make us believe that gobbledygook? But we did. We believed it. I believed the Hellraiser. I believe the Cenobites. I believe the Tall Man in Phantasm. I believe all of those things. And that's what makes them great. We believe xenomorphs exist. We believe the life cycle of xenomorphs. See, I don't believe in Alien Covenant and Prometheus. I don't believe there's a lot of stuff in there I didn't believe. I'm like, wait. I blame Damon Lindelof. He doesn't know how to create believability. But why do we believe one thing and not the other? So, yeah, that's what I want to talk about today. And it's something that I'm obsessed by all the time. I'm constantly obsessed by believability. And it never goes away. So let's see what people have to say. Zach also is here. Zach also says, Shalom, Rob. Next week, I get to go see Wrath of Khan with a discussion and Q&A with Shatner and What We Left Behind, looking back at DS9. What a week. I was lucky to watch What We Left Behind, looking back at Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I watched it. Let's just say I watched it. I thought it was great. It was very different than I thought it was going to be. I'm a veteran of making a lot of talking head documentaries. I thought their approach to the material was pretty great. I mean, I would have done it differently, but it's a pretty wonderful, really heartwarming documentary. I highly recommend it. I can't wait to buy the Blu-ray. It was great to see the Sacrifice of Angels HD footage that Mojo had done, used so well. Really exciting. Really enjoyed that documentary. So you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. So, and by the way, thanks for that letter, because Zach, you got me talking. Willow Yang just says, I've just met Khan, which means she just watched Space Seed. Boy, I'd love to read your analysis of Space Seed, Willow. I bet it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, was it? I love that episode. We offered the world order. You are an excellent tactician, Captain. That episode is so great. I can't even. No wonder they decided to bring Khan back for Star Trek 2. David Cabrera says, verisimilitude went out the door in last Game of Thrones episode. They were shooting arrows from the ships like cruise missiles. Dude, I agree. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I didn't believe that. I love the first hour of that. That conversation between Tyrion and Varys, that was peak Game of Thrones. I loved it. And then the last 20 minutes just went all to heck, as I said last night on my chat. That's maddening to me, because the thing about Game of Thrones is, what was so great was you never knew where people were going. You never knew what their allegiances were. And this guy, and I forget his name, but I don't know which YouTuber. It was a YouTube video I watched about his analysis of Game of Thrones and what's happened with Game of Thrones as it's moved through the series. And he equated it to Star Wars. It was a really, really cogent analysis. And kudos to that guy. And I don't know who it was, but it was a really, really well done video, well argued video. And he basically said what he didn't need an ending, a big ending for Game of Thrones. He just needed it to end. Meaning he didn't need these apocalyptic, he didn't need everything tied up in a bow. But what they're doing is they're trying to give you this satisfying third act conclusion. And that's not what Game of Thrones did. I mean, yeah, it brought you the epic battles in the course of history, but sometimes history is not an epic battle. And what they're doing is they're giving you the end that we all kind of would have expected. But again, it's not. I wanted it to be like the end of Return of the King, but it's not going to be that way because it's not as smart. They're making too many asks of us. Like, again, Tyrion. Why would Tyrion believe that his sister, who's wanting to kill him, would not just skewer him as he walked forward? I honestly thought that Tyrion Lannister was going to die, and there was just going to be, they just would have turned one of those things down and taken him out with one of the scorpions. Just whack. Instead they give him a plea. Please don't do this. Why? The guy killed his own father for turning the woman he loved against him. And that was an incredible betrayal. I mean, it was just, anyway, don't get me to go off, but I'm still enjoying Game of Thrones. I'm enjoying watching it. It's no longer, it went from being something I've never seen before to being, it went from being here to being here. I'm still enjoying it though. Still enjoying. Can't wait to see this week's episode. Alexander Wilson says, smart people go dumb all the time. Pete, do you have to go? You have to go here. Do you have to go here? All right. Okay. Since you're going here, Alexander, I'm going to read this. As you all know, I'm a big Seahawks fan. Alexander Wilson says, smart people go dumb all the time. Pete Carroll decided to throw the ball on the 1 yard line in the Super Bowl instead of running Marshawn Lynch. That made no sense. So why do we get mad when it happens in fiction? First of all, it did make sense because he had 4 downs. He was on the 1 yard line, and knowing his quarterback had got him where he got, they tried to do something unexpected because everybody expected him to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch to run over the the end zone, and everyone knew that. Everyone knew that. So Pete Carroll, thinking he had 4 downs to win the game, tried to change it up and do something different. No one thought that Russell Wilson was going to throw a pick. And so it was, I understand, but I don't think Pete Carroll was dumb. I think Pete Carroll was playing strategic football. He made the right call, I thought, at the time. Because the call went awry, it's like, look, I'll tell you something. My dad taught me how to play blackjack, and for my 21st birthday, took me to Las Vegas for the first time, and we played blackjack, and basically he taught me blackjack strategy. And there is blackjack strategy. Like, for instance, say the dealer's showing a 3, has a 3 up, right? And you've been dealt 2 8s. All right. Now, that's rough because the percentages are that if the dealer's holding a 3 and you've got a 16, you really could, the odds say that you could stay and probably win. But you've also got a 16. Do you always split aces? I mean, do you always split 8s? Well, usually you should split 8s, but when there's a 3 showing, the whole point is to try and win the hand. Now, what do you do in that situation? Now, normally, I would probably just stand on 16 if the dealer was showing a 3. However, I'm also playing this game. I want to enjoy it. So I'd probably split the 8s just to see where I'm at. Maybe increase my position. That's what I would do. So I think Pete Carroll was playing what I thought was strategic football. It just didn't work. If it had worked, we wouldn't have talked about it. It didn't work. But that doesn't make what he did necessarily dumb. At least that's the way I see it. Your mileage, sir, may vary. But yeah, I mean, these are all things to take into consideration. Jonathan Peck says, do you find the same with monster films in the last 7 years, including Pacific Rim, Godzilla, Jurassic World, and Kong Skull Island? See, Jonathan, you get it. This is exactly the kind of conversation I was hoping this would spark. See, that's the funny thing. I mean, I've got levels of verisimilitude that I believe in. I've got levels of suspension of disbelief that I'm willing to go with in kaiju movies. And kaiju movies are like superheroes because once you believe that a kaiju monster of that size, first of all, physics would say that a monster that size could never exist. The same reason you can't build the Starship Enterprise on the Earth. In the gravity well of a planet, a creature like Godzilla, for the most part, probably is impossible, could never exist. But because I love, there's there's something about Asian science fiction. There is a whimsy that, especially when it comes to robots and spaceships and technology and monsters in Asian culture, that we don't have in America. We don't have the whimsy. I mean, what I love about Mike Dougherty is Mike Dougherty, the director of Godzilla King of the Monsters, I don't see much of him now, but knew him pretty well. He's got whimsy to him. He's got a little whimsy, and so he gets I mean, look at Trick or Treat, and look at. I fell in love with Mike Dougherty's artwork. I see his artwork on greeting cards, like at Dark Delicacies bookstores. He has the soul of an animator, so he has this whimsical part of his soul that makes him in my mind the perfect director for King of the Monsters, and that's why I'm so excited to see it, because when you're dealing with these monsters, like in Gareth Evans' Godzilla, which I liked, it was so relentlessly like, we've got to make this believable for the American audiences. But the thing is, Godzilla as a concept has to have a little element of whimsy. So, Jonathan, it's a tough call. Where do you draw the line? In my mind, I like Pacific Rim, even though Pacific Rim, the Jaegers, ridiculous. I mean, come on. But I love them. I loved Pacific Rim, the first one. I loved it. I love the kaijus. I loved it. A lot of people couldn't get past it. They're like, oh, it's stupid. I love Pacific Rim. Why? Because I'm hardwired to believe in the whimsy of those things. But even within the confines of a giant monster movie, you got to make me believe in it. Like Kong Skull Island, I totally believed in Kong Skull Island. I loved Skull Island. I loved it. I believed in it. I totally believe what I was watching. Even when John C. Reilly shows up and his character was clearly, oh, here's a movie character. Here's a character that only exists in the movies. And we all recognize that character. And here he is. Even though I thought that character was a little silly, I still liked it. So, okay. Where do you go? Well, in the case of that movie, I believed it. Pacific Rim, I love Pacific Rim. Come on, if you're not going to give me aliens from Planet X, give me other aliens that are sending giant monsters that are getting bigger all the time because they're engineering them through a rift at the bottom of the ocean. Sure. And we have 300-foot tall robots with the hydraulics that can actually throw a punch that could take one of these creatures out. I'll believe that. I did. I bought into it hook, line, and sinker, because why not? Because that's the ask. The ask is that kaijus and Jaegers exist and guys pilot them. That's your ask. And if you make me believe in that world, and they made me believe because I'm truly a kid at heart. So I'm like, okay, there's something that's remaining from my childlike sense of wonder that allows me to believe in these movies. So I'm like, I'll go with that. I've got knife head. I got the NECA knife head and the NECA 18-inch Jaeger. I have that. I had to get that. So I believe that. Jurassic World. See, now Jurassic World, here's a whole different thing. See, dinosaurs were real. So the physics of the real world that I live in apply to dinosaurs. So like Jurassic World, and especially Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, again, they're pushing it. Like that dinosaur stampede, is that realistic? I know it seems silly to even say that kind of thing, but it again, when dinosaurs are real, so you've got to make me believe. Like I like Jurassic Park 2. When you saw a dinosaur in San Diego, I mean, they played that pretty well. I was like, okay, I'm into it. And the way that dinosaurs were portrayed, I mean, the raptors, the way they were hunting, I'll believe in that too. But I think that, Jonathan, that's a very good question. And that's when you really start to ask yourself, I think there's a lot of, look, the best filmmaking always makes you believe. It always makes you believe. And even with fantasy films, it's even more important. It's got to make you believe. And I think it's one of the hardest things to do. And the great filmmakers understand how to do it. I think one of the problems with movies today is that so many films, they have previous companies designing that are they might not even be working hand in hand with the director. The director should be overseeing all of the previous stuff. But when you're using CG, one of the byproducts I think that's happened because of CG is the physical world has been left behind frequently, whether it's space battles, whether it's like what Terry was writing about in his letter about Star Trek space battles really are based on giant capital ships, naval combat. That's why we call it the lake. We want to get rid of the space lake, because there's not a lot of three-dimensional thinking. And even Star Trek ships, you don't. One of the things I wanted to do when I was directing the ill-fated fan feature film Prelude to or Axanar was I really wanted to show the X, Y, and Z axis as the axis as capital ships would use that. And even if you look at the beginning of the battles of say at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, all the ships are kind of on the same. I mean, there's three dimensions there, but they're all kind of going in opposite directions, formations that are kind of flat, whereas the battles would be spherical in space all around. But yeah, I think with CG, it's really sort of pushed credibility. I think that you have to be smart about using in my mind, one of the greatest uses, one of the great special effects extravaganzas that have ever been made is Starship Troopers. The combination of physical effects, CGI, model work, a lot of verisimilitude there. And the ask is the whole universe, the fascistic human future that it portrays. But I really believed in the visual effects, even 23 or 23 years later, they hold up. And so I think that's really important. And I think Jonathan's question is really well taken. It's a point well taken, because where does that begin? I ask you, Jonathan, what do you think? What do you think about believability as far as these movies are concerned? And yeah, I mean, again, it's a constant battle between science fiction, fantasy, and horror films. Where does believability begin and where does it end? And it's tough. And as a filmmaker, that is your hardest job, to make people believe. Alexander Wilson says, that was some Seahawks fanboy talk there. Not giving the ball to the best running back in the league is like not giving Jordan the ball with the game on the line. Look, man, he would have had the ball the next play. They just knew what the play was. Uncle Pete was trying to change things up, make some magic happen. This is how legends are born. Marshawn might have been just stopped cold there. Why not try something, unique? And look, the only reason people are talking about it now like it was a mistake is because it didn't work. That doesn't mean it couldn't work. It doesn't mean it was bad strategy. I mean, you had 3 other downs to try and get it in there, but he was trying to do it. Everyone knew what he was going to do. Everybody knew. He tried to do something that not everybody knew he was going to do. Tried to change it up. That's how you become a legend. That's how you win games. Sometimes it doesn't work. In this case, we're still talking about it. It's still painful. But yes, I'm a Seahawks fanboy, but I also believe in that. If it had worked, people would have been like, oh my God, what a play. Why? No one would have been saying, why didn't you give it to Marshawn? It would have been looking like it was a great piece of strategy. Again, that's just me. Justin Carr. Justin Carr says, this is Doshi's boyfriend. Bad news. Unfortunately, Doshi passed away. Alex is upset for being banned and losing her boyfriend. Justin, I'm very, very sorry to hear that. Doshi was active in both the John Campea show chats and he came here all the time. So that's sad news. I don't know what to say to you, sir. But my heart goes out to you and his family. And very, very sorry. Very sorry to hear that. It's too bad. Anyway, yeah, so for everyone, Doshi, who is an active member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, he found out he was diagnosed with leukemia a couple weeks back, and he was scared, and he didn't know how much time he had left, and clearly he had even less time than he thought. So very sorry to hear that. It sort of makes all this talk inconsequential. But then on the other hand, it also makes me think about the fact that, everybody here in this community, we have an embarrassment of riches. And it makes me think about the fact that, we take our lives for granted. We some people are complaining about the time travel in Endgame, while other people just wanted another day to live. And I think it's important to remember at times that all of these things that we love, all of the science fiction, the fantasy, the horror, the books, the movies, the TV, the comics, the board games, whatever it is you're into, they're all luxury items. All of it is a luxury that we live in a time and a place in human history where we're able to have these things that we can enjoy so much, that we live in a world where technology allows us to share information. Even now, I can't imagine what Alex and Justin are going through, but we have this kind of technology to share information with each other, and to hopefully convey the fact that what's most important is each other. I mean, what is the one resource on this planet that we take for granted? But that's each other. And I'm very, very sorry to hear about that. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I would like to have known more about Doshi. I don't know anything about him. I don't even know where he's from, but I really appreciated him coming to these chats. He always put a smile on my face. And it's strange to me, because there's somebody that I've been interacting with on these chats that on the internet, you're anonymous. You don't, all I knew was his avatar that always made me smile. I don't know anything about him. And now I won't ever know anything about him. So, if you could write me, Justin, or Alex could write me and tell me a little bit about him, I would appreciate that. Jonathan Peck comes back at me and he says, first off, thank you for answering my question. I do believe that dinosaurs and monsters are real in the context of the movie, and I do like all the films that I mentioned. I do too. Even though I had some problems with Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, I mean, ever since I was a kid, you can't go wrong with dinosaurs. And I think that you're right. I mean, in the context, but that's the thing. They have to make you believe in those things within the context of the film. That's the key. That's the kicker. That's the tough thing. And I think Spielberg did a masterful job of how they introduce you to the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. I mean, it's so weird now, because people talk about, I mean, Steven Spielberg is one of the best. He's probably the GOAT. He really is. I mean, as much as I say that, Spielberg is a great director. He's one of my favorite directors, but not the favorite. I mean, there's other movies I like. Stanley Kubrick is probably my favorite director of all time, bar none. But there's a lot of directors I love. I love Kurosawa. I love Coppola. But Spielberg, as far as he's probably the GOAT in terms of using cinema to elicit responses in people, because of the way he used, literally, the language. He's like a savant. The way he puts shots together, the shots that he designs, it's amazing. And you watch the way, and people are like, oh, he's manipulative. Well, all movies are manipulative. Every movie. It's just Spielberg makes no bones about the fact that I'm manipulating you right now. Absolutely, he is. And I love it. And in Jurassic Park, he makes you believe in dinosaurs, just like he made you believe in that shark in Jaws, even though we look back on it now and some of the shots are a little sketchy. But for the most part, because he didn't show you the shark very much, you believe. And I think in Jurassic Park, man, one of the moments that I'll never forget in my life is watching that brachiosaur rear up, and taking the leaves off the trees when Sam Neill takes his glasses off and steps up. I mean, that Sam Neill was the proxy for all of us sitting in the audience going, oh my God, they've made photorealistic dinosaurs for the first time. And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. That was great, great, great stuff. And I think that's really important. Wow, you guys are coming at me. Telia, is it Telia Boston? For me, oh, this is good. I like this. Okay. Telia Boston says, for me, the difference is in expectations. Movies that try to convince you that they are based in reality are harder to overlook when they don't work. Very astute point. That is an incredibly cogent observation. Thank you for that, because you're right. If you're trying to create a reality the way Kubrick did in, say, 2001, the way I would say Spielberg is trying to create a reality in Jurassic Park, um, it is much harder. But then again, what Peter Jackson did in Lord of the Rings, there's an expectation that we know Lord of the Rings has ring wraiths and orcs and all that, but the world of Middle Earth, from the prologue of Fellowship of the Ring, we know where we're at. And then what was so brilliant about the way that Lord of the Rings was made as a film, it's one thing when you're reading the book, but when you watch this prologue about the end of the second age of Middle Earth and the first defeat of Sauron and the loss of the ring, and then you cut to the Shire, and the Shire shows that this Middle Earth is a real world. People sweep their porches. They have produce. And you still get Gandalf and the fireworks and all that, but they're like fireworks. He's not casting fiery spells from his fingers. I mean, they do a really good job of creating the world. And with fantasy, science fiction, and horror, I think you're very right, is that the more based in reality something is, the harder it is. But you also need reality in your unreality. You can't just make things have no rules. You can't just have a fantasy world where everybody can do whatever they want, because then it becomes boring. Then you're like, there is no rules, so I don't care. But very good point. Very good point. Lee Sandoval says Zac Efron is Wolverine. He's short, jacked, and can act. I don't know. I mean, I've always liked him. I haven't seen the Ted Bundy movie though. Can he be that ferocious person? I don't know. Alexander Wilson says, just admit it that Pete Carroll made a mistake. Pete Carroll, everyone, is the coach of the Seahawks. I will not admit that he made a mistake. I won't, because I don't think it was a mistake. He was playing tactical football. He made a call and it didn't work. You know, you never know. That's the game. Just because a play doesn't work doesn't necessarily mean he made a mistake. There's no guarantee Marshawn Lynch wouldn't have had the ball stripped from him. You never know. You just never know. You don't know. All that anybody knew is that the obvious thing that everybody knew was going to happen, including the opposing team, didn't happen, and it went awry. If it had gone right, if the ball wasn't picked and the touchdown was scored, it would have been a genius move. Everyone expected him to do, but Pete Carroll changed it up and won the Super Bowl. I don't think it was a mistake. I don't. David Cabrera says Tom Brady is the GOAT. Well, okay, I guess because I know it's Muhammad Ali and GOAT is traditionally a sports term, but I like it when we usurp terms to use it for other things. And I think you could call Spielberg the GOAT. Why not? Why can't you call him the GOAT? Sure you can. He's pretty damn good and pretty diverse. Alexa Mayer says, thank everyone who prayed for Doshi. He loves you 3,000. You're killing me. Alexa, I'd like to know more about Doshi if you're still watching, if there's anything we could do or say to his family, because he was a vibrant member of the community. And I just met him through the John Campea show, through his chats and his participation. And what a bummer. Yeah, I'm bummed. I don't know. Victor Acosta says they should have run with it, Rob. Look, I know. I would love it if they did run with it and Marshawn Lynch got into the end zone, but we'll never know. But I don't think what Pete Carroll did was bad. I don't think what he did was bad. I don't think it was wrong. I think it was a strategic call. It's just like, you follow strategic calls. He was down there. He had 4 downs to get that ball in. No one thought that anybody was going to throw a pick. And yeah. Matthew Ferguson says, RMB, what is your prediction for the Hawks and Wilson's new contract and Clark being traded? Well, here's the thing. When you've paid someone as much money as the Seahawks paid Russell Wilson, it creates, I think, an imbalance both on your team and with expectations from the audience. It's tough. And And Clark being gone, I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to reserve judgment. Let's see where it goes. Let's see what the preseason has in store for all of us. Hard to say. Hard to say. Rob Williams says the 1978 Superman was my first exposure to that wow feeling, and like the tag, I believed a man could fly. Me too. I was wowed, but I was wowed by Logan's Run. I was wowed by Star Wars. But yeah, I mean, that wow thing, everybody has a different one. I was wowed by Jurassic Park. I was wowed by The Matrix, the red pill, blue pill. Man, when he woke up in that battery pack, I was like, oh my God, I was wowed. Vesna is here. Hello, Vesna. I'm so sorry to hear that. I was really hoping that he would pull off. Condolences to his family. Me too. Me too. Rex Rachel said that Zac Efron would be a ridiculous choice for Wolverine. Patrick Glanville said that pass was good. It hit the receiver in hands first. It was a defensive penalty. Oh, man. Patrick Glanville. Matthew Ferguson says, Patrick Glanville, truth. It's, yeah. We're going to be talking about this, I think, for the rest of my life. Alexander Wilson says, I see we found something you love more than Trek. Everybody outside of Seattle knows that Carol was wrong. Even Richard Sherman agrees. Hey man, Richard Sherman, come on. You know what? I used to wear Richard Sherman's Nikes, his Seahawks Nikes, his Legion of Boom special edition Nikes. I do not wear them anymore. I do not love the Seahawks more than I love Star Trek. I do not. But I do like the Seahawks. Fen War says, hello from New York on this somber day. I love when Fen Ward jumps into the chats and says, hello from New York. Yeah, it's a bummer. Shay says, Campy has been hypercritical of Endgame. He thinks has more to do with his Star Wars fandom. Seeing the MCU as somehow a threat to the Star Wars legacy. I don't know if that's true. I mean, John's opinionated, but I don't know if he's I don't think he sees his threats. I couldn't go on the show today, and I really wanted to talk about the upcoming 3 Star Wars movies, but a lot of people are like, oh no, we're not going to get a Star Wars movie for another 3 years, 2022, but we're getting The Mandalorian, so it's not like we're not getting Star Wars. They're spending a lot of money on Star Wars, and they've renewed it for season 2, and I think that's really cool. Matthew Ferguson says, Alexander Wilson, R&B and every Seahawks fan will say the call was a mistake if every Pats fan admits that Tom Brady and Belichick cheated. Fair? Okay, let's nip this in the bud right now. Maybe I will admit, as Carter Burke said in Aliens, it was a bad call. It was a bad call. Just Plain Steve says, I think a condition of suspending disbelief is wanting to see the characters and story you love treated right. It's a give and take relationship between the studio and the viewer. Prayers for Doshi. Yes. Look, I think, again, to me, it's the author. And I while everybody weighs in, I still believe in the auteur theory. A movie is still filtered through the director. It's the director's vision, ultimately. He's managing all the different departments. Sure, the writer dreamed up the script, but once a screenplay is given over to the director, if the writer of the screenplay is not also the director, then the director must filter that vision that the writer has given him. And I really think, yes, everybody who contributes to a film, look, the costume designers can torpedo the verisimilitude of a movie. I think one of the great things that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done so brilliantly is their costume design. You believe those costumes, and you have seen our characters. They're not just wearing those costumes all the time. We saw Thor wears a hoodie. Those costumes are like they're going into battle costumes, and I think they've made us believe. And I think that you like just plain Steve said, it's the way things are treated. I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And any decision, there's a million decisions that get made in the making of any movie. Any one decision, if the director's sensibility is not right, and looks at a costume design that betrays the verisimilitude of the rest of the film, you could torpedo the whole enterprise right then and there, so to speak. Matthew Ferguson says, R&B, whatever Doshis need, the Post-Geek Singularity community should try and assist. We're family. I don't know anything about Doshi other than his partner, his boyfriend who was here, and his friend Alex. I don't know anything about him or where to get a hold of him or where to get a hold of his family. But yeah, I think you're right. We should support him. Koba says, how can aliens travel between worlds yet and not have protection against bacteria? I'm talking to you, H.G. Wells. Well, that is, of course, a reference to War of the Worlds, but here's the thing, you don't know. I mean, the aliens, it's funny now we look at about it and think, oh, well, we traipse all over the world. We go into the rainforest, we go all over the place. And look what's going on right now. There's an Ebola outbreak in Africa. Like, how would we know that? How do we even know what Ebola was? Even on this planet, it was something they might not have anticipated. And maybe because they'd never encountered the bacteria that killed them before, they had no systems. So here's how I think. Here's how I'm thinking in terms of that. That's a very, very good question, first of all. So H.G. Wells, the Martians, by the way, this is a spoiler, but the Martians in War of the Worlds, and as we saw in both film adaptations, in addition to the book, there was bacteria, the common cold, a human malady of some kind, took them out, killed the aliens. Well, here's the thing. If you've never encountered that bacteria before, and you even have advanced systems and you're scanning the planet, you're looking for contagions of some kind that I'm sure Willow Yang could speak to this far better than I could, but you're looking for things that would destroy you. But if these aliens clearly had yet to encounter such a virus or whatever it was that actually killed them, that even their advanced systems didn't detect it, because why would they? They didn't know it was out there. They didn't know they were vulnerable. And that's why in my mind, I'm like, I don't disbelieve that. I don't disbelieve that. Now, see, this is the funny thing. Fans are always, like you asked, it's not a bad question to ask. Well, then how come they couldn't, with all of their technologically advanced weapons and their systems, how did they not know that there was a virus that could kill them on Earth? In my mind, that's not a plot hole. That's something that can be easily explained because by what I just said, well, maybe their technology, they'd never encountered it before. They didn't know it was here. So to me, that's not a plot hole, and that's not something that makes me that gets in the way of me suspending my disbelief. I explain it like I've talked about for a long time on the show. There are books, there's anthologies called the Best of Trek anthologies, and they were all, I mean, we're talking 70s and 80s, and they were essays that delved into the Star Trek universe, did deep dives into classic Star Trek. They predated Next Generation, and they would examine inconsistencies, and they would offer what might be true, what could have happened. And it helped my understanding of the Star Trek universe, and it helped me when there are things that I would bump on. I'm like, oh, here's reasons why we shouldn't bump on those things. And I think that there's a lot of that, and a lot of fans, we can't help it as fans. We're trying to figure out, well, if A and B are true, then C, D, and E must also be true. And I think it's something that we do as fans. It's one of the great things about being a fan. So, but in the case of War of the Worlds, that doesn't bother me because there's a plausible explanation there. So, and at least I believe that. I really believe that. David Cabrera says each genre has its degree of suspension. If Spidey all of a sudden shows up in Hellraiser, that would completely take the audience out of the movie. Totally agree. But again, within the confines of Hellraiser, you're believing, like, for instance, I think here's how wacky. Here's some insight into my personality. I wonder, because hey, Epic Comics did publish a Hellraiser series. Who's to say that Hellraiser could not have happened in the MCU? I mean, our superheroes would never have encountered the Cenobites. There's no reason to, because they're about corrupting the souls of an individual. But if, say, a superhero were to find, like, if Tony Stark or if Doctor Strange in the Sanctum Sanctorum had if he had the lament configuration, and I'm sure a filmmaker could do this, could have the lament configuration like on a shelf, I would believe that. I'd be like, yeah, okay. The Cenobites exist in the MCU. But in my own mind, I'm constantly doing that. Because movies, horror films, like I believe, like if you watch Phantasm, I've talked about Phantasm. There's no reason for me to believe that Phantasm couldn't take place in the world, in the universe of any other franchise. Like, for instance, Lethal Weapon. Who's to say that Morningside Cemetery isn't there, somewhere, that the tall man is not in some Central California or town or wherever the hell Phantasm takes place, that outside of Sacramento or something. Who's to say that all of these intersections of these fantastical worlds don't meet? But I believe that the Cenobites exist, and they could show up at any time. So I do think if Spider-Man showed up in Hellraiser, it would would have to be set up. If you saw the lament configuration, if you saw the puzzle box in New York on Bleecker Street, you could then believe that, oh, Spider-Man can now interact with the Cenobites because they've made us believe. If that makes any sense. I mean, I think it's a possibility. I think it could definitely happen. Joseph asks, Rob, how is Starbucks coffee in Winterfell affecting your verisimilitude? Not well. See, those kinds of mistakes they just make me angry. They shouldn't happen. That's it's a complete destruction of verisimilitude. Complete destruction. The King of Scotland says, as a Pats fan, my favorite story is when a kindergarten teacher asked his class what the Super Bowl was. One of the kids raised his hands and says, the Super Bowl is when the Pats play their last game of the season. I don't like the Pats. But hey, you know what? I don't like the Pats because Tyler S. says Hellraiser reboot. Yeah, David Goyer is writing it. As I said, I'm interested in seeing it if they go back to the original novella, The Hellbound Heart. We'll see. I mean, who knows? I don't know. Could be good. Bozo the Clown says, Rob, I'm watching you while listening to Jan Hammer and Crockett's theme. It'll make you look like a Miami Vice episode. I'd love to have Crockett's hair. I should get my hair cut as Crockett's hair again. Writer B.L. Alley says that H.G. Wells is one of my favorite authors. I'm a big fan of H.G. Wells as well. And you know what? If you're a fan of H.G. Wells and you like War of the Worlds, Stephen Baxter wrote a War of the Worlds sequel that I actually liked. I thought it was pretty good. And, the original War of the Worlds, for those who might not know, takes place in Victorian London. And it's pretty neat. I think it's great. Mark Dooley says, didn't Vader fight RoboCop and the Indian in the cupboard? Well, again, when you're dealing with toys, anything is possible. Anything is possible. The King of Scotland says, I think the Starbucks cup was a viral marketing and not a mistake. Thoughts? I don't know. I don't think they would have done that. Did anyone see Matt Damon's name on the graves that Ant-Man was checking out? What the fuck? I don't know. I didn't see that, but I believe it's there. Captain Robert April says, instruments detect only what they're designed to detect. Space still contains many unknowns. Name the episode for a duranium-plated no prize. You know what? I recognize it, but I can't. I don't know. I don't know what off the top of my head. I'd start with Obsession. I don't know. But I'm not sure. I would go Obsession, or I would go to, let's see. If I had to guess, and I don't know this one, Operation Annihilate, Obsession, The Immunity Syndrome, Savage Curtain. I don't know. Not sure. That's just off the top of my head. That's what I would say. Doshi's here. Wait, I died. What the fuck? Who is trolling and pretending to be Alex, and who is Justin? Boyfriend isn't named Justin. How sick. And okay. Well, Doshi apparently is back. Maybe this whole thing we've been getting trolled. Doshi, are you apparently we've been told that you died of a heart attack, that you died today, but you're here. See, It bums me out. Now Doshi, I see Doshi's avatar. Doshi's saying Doshi, and Doshi, we were told you died, and I don't know, man. But if all this is just some elaborate catfish, you're catfishing the Post-Geek Singularity community. I don't know. Everybody was really sad here. I don't know what's up, but that bums me out because you've taken me on an emotional roller coaster ride. So Yellow Flash says, I'm going to stop asking questions watching these videos. Rob clearly has favorites and only reads their questions. That isn't true. That's not true at all. I don't have favorites. Hassan Chavez says, is Doshi even real? Doshi says you're alive. Doshi, your credibility has been strained. You know what? My suspension of disbelief, Doshi, you've got to bring back my my belief. I can no longer suspend my disbelief with Doshi, or suspend my belief. I don't know what I'm going to do. Matthew Ferguson says Rob is Electra Girl and Dyna Girl, part of the MCU. That's part of the Croft Super Show with Dr. Shrinker and Wonderbug. I used to like. Joseph says, I knew those were some kind of trolls. Well, there we go. We got some kind of trolls. Alex is at work. Oh, well then, Doshi, you're not dead. I guess we all got trolled. See, that's what happens on the internet. I'm glad you're alive, Doshi. It's a magical place says, how many hot toys do you have, Rob? Planning on starting a collection, but it's a huge task. You know what? How many hot toys do I have? I want to say 100, something like that. Probably 100. I would imagine. Yeah, I think. I don't know. Some of them are in boxes. I don't. A lot of them aren't even open. Somebody said that the guy who reported Doshi dying was a troll. Oh, well then there we go. Let's give Doshi the benefit of the doubt. Doshi, don't be sorry, Doshi. I'm just happy you're not dead and that you're still here. That's what happens on the internet. Bill Hunt says, what action figure is that behind you? You know what this is? This is Matilda from Leon, the Professional. I have a oh, there goes our houseplant. Yes, I have a Leon. I have a Jean Reno Leon, the Professional action figure that's really, really good. And a company made this. It's not a great action figure, but I love the fact that I now have a Matilda and her houseplant. So that's good. So yeah, Doshi, they were messing with you. I'm glad you're not dead. Fake account. Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say. I'm glad to have you back. It's amazing, Doshi. You know what? You died and you were resurrected, which is more than Tony Stark could say right in this chat, which is amazing. Bozo the Clown said, you hear that Cliffhanger is getting remade? Why is Cliffhanger getting remade? Bill Hunt says, laugh out loud. Wow, a few feet make all the difference in action figure identification. Rex Racer says, that's from the Professional. Yes, but the Professional was actually called Leon in the rest of the world. I was called Leon because the extended version, we got a version called the Professional that was actually edited down because the relationship between Leon and Matilda was a little sketchy. We couldn't hang with that apparently in this. In the Cinema Survey, Troy says Doshi is the new Gandalf. I'm just glad. I was actually sad, man. I was very, very sad. Chris Hassian says, so Thanos is one timeline is stopped, but in all the other he still wins. That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. We shall see. Maybe, but yeah, I guess so. I guess there's other Thanoses. I don't know. Anyway, people, I want to bring this chat to a close. Sorry, I had technical difficulties. I was trying to start my new Wirecast software, like what John Campia uses to really up the ante, but I couldn't get I thought I was all connected. When I went to actually go live with my lower thirds and a little bit more production value, it didn't work. and I don't know why. I thought I tested it. I thought it worked. So thanks for sticking with me today. I'm going to end this chat. Remember, subscribe, hit the bell if you like it. Go to the Burnettwork website if you want. Send me letters. That's where I get all my letters, is at the Burnettwork website. You can now become a member of the Post-Geek Singularity. That's true. For $1, you can become a Post-Geek Singularity member for an entire year. We're going to start dropping original content. I'm going to be moving off of Patreon. So the people that subscribe to me on Patreon, I really and are my patrons there. Thank you very much for that. I know people like Willow have transitioned over, but I'm going to do things more on the website now. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, if there's anything you want to share, collections, tattoos, short stories, artwork, please go to the Post-Geek Singularity, or actually the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery for Post-Geek Singularity members. There is an Imagination Connoisseur Gallery on my website, the Burnettwork, and it's starting to grow. There's some cool stuff up there. So I'm looking forward to seeing more people, even if it's your collection of physical media, whatever it is, cosplay. I want to see all of it. Whatever you want to share, please do so at theburnettwork.net. I want to make that the hub of the Post-Geek Singularity community. And anything you want, send it to me. There's a form to submit pictures and things right on the website. We can take care of that for you. Please do so. I love seeing what you guys send. And again, I want to thank Lucky Tiger for sponsoring this podcast. For men who want to look good and feel great, Lucky Tiger men's grooming products are great. I love them. I use them all the time. And go to getluckytiger.com and punch in if you want to buy some stuff there. Again, I highly recommend the facial scrub, and I love the liquid shaving cream. But if you check out, when you check out, you can punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity and get 20% off your order, which is pretty cool. So anyway, I'm going to bring this chat to an end. I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for all of you that send in support to this channel. It means a lot to me. It helps me. Well, apparently it doesn't help me get all this new technology that I've purchased for these chats to make it a little cooler. I can't quite get it to work yet, which, I mean, come on. I'm trying to keep up with the new technologies and make these chats great. But I promise soon it's all going to work out. And soon you're going to see the Space Rob video game, which I'm very excited to see and share with you, which is pretty funny. And also, I remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And you know, it's really interesting. In this chat, Doshi died, but we sent out hopes and prayers to him, and he was resurrected all in the space of 90 minutes. Where can you do that on the internet? Thanks to all of you for being here for Robservations live chat number 114. Very much appreciated. I will see you back here tomorrow. I will be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. I'm sorry I missed today. Had a personal matter that I forgot about that had to be attended to, and it was attended to. So thanks very much. Have a better day.